Most people treat Claude Code like some kind of vending machine. You punch in a prompt, cross your fingers, and hope something decent drops out. But here's the thing. Claude gets way more powerful when you stop treating it like magic and start treating it like your new teammate, one that learns how you think, remembers your weird preferences, and actually gets better over time. We're talking about fixing real bugs, writing clean Swift tests, even managing your GitHub PRs, all with your personal style baked right in. That's the big idea for this episode. Shifting your approach from just using Claude Code to genuinely collaborating with it, making it an essential part of your indie dev toolkit. And heads up, today's episode is going deep. We're talking long form, in depth, behind the scenes details. Because let's be honest, the difference between just another shiny AI tool and something you actually stick with is understanding not just how it works, but why. So grab your headphones, whether you're out on a walk, coding at your favorite cafe, or just kicking back on the couch. We've got a lot to unpack. Real quick, I'm Daniel. I've been building iOS apps for about 8 years, mostly freelancing and shipping stuff for other folks. But since Dub 25, I've taken the leap into full-time indie dev, started building in public, and honestly, still figuring out this whole personal brand thing as I go. But that's a story for another time. All right, before we jump in, let's set the stage a bit. Claude Code is basically Anthropic's AI shell sidekick. If you haven't played with it yet, picture having a super flexible assistant right in your command line. It doesn't lock you into some rigid workflow or bury you under tons of guardrails. Instead, Claude is more like, hey, here's direct access to the model, raw and powerful. You figure out how to make it work best for your projects. That's awesome. But let's be real for a second. It can also be pretty intimidating when you're first getting started. There's definitely a learning curve. But what I genuinely love about this article and why I'm excited to break it down today is that it's not some corporate rule book full of official do's and don'ts. It's more like chatting with engineers who've spent countless hours actually living with Claude Code day to day. They're saying, hey, here's what's worked for us. Here are the little habits and tricks that genuinely save you headaches, time, and frustration, especially if you're building stuff solo. That's exactly what we're diving into today, one piece at a time. Let's get into it. So here's the first thing that hit me about this article. Claude Code works best when you teach it about your world. Every code base, every indie project, every solo dev, honestly, has its quirks. The more you can surface those quirks up front, the more helpful Claude becomes. This is where the Claude.md file comes in. Imagine you're onboarding a new teammate, except this time that teammate is an AI that needs context fast. The Claude.md is your spot to write down all the little gotchas, scripts, style rules, or shortcuts that you'd want to explain to a human, but now you do it for Claude. There's no required format. You can toss in bash commands, notes on your preferred code style. For Swift, for instance, always use struct over class unless you really need reference semantics. Quick references for how you run tests, even weird behaviors or workarounds. Basically, if there's something that has bitten you or will bite someone else, you should probably stick it in here. The cool part is you can put this file in different places. Most people put it in the root of their repo and check it into Git, which is great if you want those reminders to always be around. But you can also put a version in your home folder. So every Claude session across projects knows your preferences. If you're a solo dev who hops between side projects, experiments, and client gigs, this is gold. I actually started by putting my preferred Swiftlint rules and notes on setting up Firebase for new iOS projects in Claude.md, and it saves me so much context setting time. Now, every time I run Claude, it pulls in those notes automatically, and I can spend less energy re-explaining things. But here's something I didn't realize at first. Your Claude.md file isn't set it and forget it. You should iterate on it, try things, see how Claude responds, and update the file as you notice patterns. What helps the model follow your intentions and what doesn't. Some Anthropic engineers will even add emphasis like important, always use feature branches, or you must use the repo's PyEnv version, and you can update it quickly, even during coding, by using the # to get Claude to document new commands or quirks as you encounter them. Another pro tip, if you're working in a mono repo, like say you have your main iOS app plus a backend or widgets directory, you can have a Claude.md in each. Claude will pull in the relevant context for where you're working, and you get this kind of layered memory, which is awesome for more complex solo setups. Now, permissions. This is one thing I actually love about Claude Code. It errs on the side of safety. Out of the box, it'll prompt you before doing anything potentially destructive, like editing files or running certain bash commands. But if you trust your environment, or say you're in a local dev container and you just want to move fast, you can list specific tools or actions. You can do this in a few ways. When you get prompted, you can hit always allow. You can use the /permissions command to tweak what's permitted, or you can edit a JSON settings file if you like to manage it manually. I find the session-specific CLI flag -- allowed tools handy for little experiments or when I'm prototyping. One last thing in this section, if you're using GitHub, install the GH CLI. It's not just a nice to have. Claude understands GH really well, and you unlock way more streamlined GitHub automation by making it available. Let's talk about tooling up. Claude Code doesn't just live in its own world, it lives in your shell with access to your bash tools and whatever scripts or helpers you've built up over the years. For a lot of solo devs, your bash environment is like this bespoke toolkit you've crafted over time. Claude can use those tools if you tell it how. So if you have custom bash scripts, like maybe a script to spin up your local dev database, or to sync assets with S3, or a custom Swift build wrapper, you can teach Claude about them. The trick is to document usage examples in your Claude.md, or just tell Claude to run -- help to get the docs. But there's more. Claude supports something called MCP, basically a protocol for connecting to servers that expose extra tools. If that sounds intimidating, just know that it's a way to plug in things like Puppeteer for browser automation, or Sentry for error reporting, or honestly, whatever workflow makes sense for your stack. If you want Claude to interact with those, you can set them up in your project or global config and you get a supercharged environment. You can also use a debug flag to help you spot issues with this setup, which is helpful when you're getting started. And then there are custom /commands. Okay, I love this. If you have a repeated workflow, debugging a certain kind of log, running some analysis, doing code review, whatever, you can store a prompt template in a markdown file, drop it into .claude/commands, and boom, you've got your own reusable command. You can even parameterize them. So you can, for instance, make a /fix GitHub issue 1234 command that will fetch issue number 1234, analyze it, and run through your whole preferred flow for fixing, testing, and making a PR. I have a few custom ones for things like updating dependencies or bumping version numbers, and it feels like building your own little army of bots. So you've got your setup, you've got your tools. Now comes the question every solo dev faces: how do I actually use this thing? Day to day. Anthropic highlights that there isn't just one way. In fact, the flexibility is the whole point. But over time, some patterns have emerged. Workflows that just seem to click, especially for bigger projects or gnarlier problems. One of my favorites is the explore, plan, code, commit flow. You start by having Claude read relevant files, sometimes with a general pointer like read the Swift file that handles authentication, or something more specific. Here's the kicker. At this stage, you explicitly tell Claude not to write any code yet. I cannot stress this enough. If you just say, go fix this bug, Claude will jump right in, sometimes making changes before you've even agreed on what the problem is. Slowing down and asking for research and a plan first gives you way better results, especially for anything non-trivial. And here's a new twist: sub-agents. These are like little Claude sub-processes that go off and investigate specific questions. For complex tasks, this helps keep the main context clean and focused. So if you're tackling, say, a multi-step refactor in your SwiftUI app, you can have sub-agents check out different sections or possible edge cases. Once you're happy with Claude's plan, you have it write the code, and you ask it to sanity check its own solution as it goes. This extra "are you sure?" step seems small, but it saved me more than once from half-baked fixes or things that almost compile. When you're happy, you can have Claude handle the commit and PR. Honestly, sometimes it's just nice to offload the tedious stuff and focus your own energy on the fun parts. Another killer workflow: test-driven development with Claude. You have Claude write the tests first, being explicit that you're doing TDD so it doesn't try to fill in mock implementations. Run those tests and confirm they fail. Yep, failing tests are progress here. Once you're satisfied with your tests, then have Claude write the code that makes them pass, iterate as needed, and use sub-agents to make sure it isn't just overfitting to your exact tests. This is TDD with the speed dialed up, plus you can catch yourself before you fall into the trap of just chasing green check marks. For more visual stuff like UI work, you can provide screenshots or mocks. If you've got a design target, let Claude see it. You can even use browser or simulator integrations for this, but honestly, I've also had good luck just pasting screenshots right into the session. You iterate until you're happy, then commit. Oh, and if you're feeling daring, there's a safe YOLO mode, dangerously skipping permissions, letting Claude run wild in a containerized environment. I'll be honest, I only use this in local dev containers with no internet access and never on anything precious, but it's actually pretty handy for boilerplate heavy tasks or cleaning up a ton of lint warnings in one go. Here's another pro move. If you're onboarding to a new code base, use Claude, as your pair programmer. Ask it the kind of questions you'd ask another human. How does logging work in this app? Where's the right place to hook into the onboarding flow? Claude will explore and summarize, and it's genuinely a huge boost when you're ramping up. And yeah, you can have Claude handle Git for you, searching Git history, writing commit messages that actually make sense, even handling tricky rebase or patch scenarios. Same thing with GitHub, creating PRs, fixing simple like code review comments, even triaging issues. It's like having a superpower for the boring stuff. For the data scientists and indie devs who like to prototype with Jupyter notebooks, Claude can read and write them, interpret outputs, and even help you polish your notebook to make your visuals look great. For that all-important demo, no special prompts required, just ask. Now let's talk about squeezing more out of every session. The biggest thing I've learned, both from this article and from my own solo projects, is that specificity is your best friend. The more you spell out what you want, what file, what function, what output, even what edge case to focus on, the better Claude's first pass will be. There's this temptation to just say, add tests for this file, or add a calendar widget. But if you take the time to be detailed, like write a new test case for auth manager .swift covering when the user is logged out, and don't use any mocks, or look at how the existing widgets are built on the home view and follow that pattern using only built-in libraries. The results are not just better, but faster. You spend way less time correcting course. Don't forget the power of visuals too. You can paste screenshots. Pro tip: on Mac, use Command plus Control plus Shift plus 4 to grab a clipboard screenshot, drag and drop images, or just provide file paths. If you're working from a Figma design or have a hand-drawn wireframe on your iPad, throw it into context. Claude does so much better with a visual target, especially for anything UI or layout related. It also helps to mention specific files, use tab completion to quickly pull in the right file names or folders. That way, Claude is seeing what it needs. If you're using documentation URLs or need Claude to reference external docs, paste the URLs right into your prompts. To avoid getting prompted every time, you can allow list those domains. Now here's a secret sauce. Course correct early and often, even if you use auto accept mode, letting Claude work more autonomously. You still get better results by collaborating. You can always ask for a plan before code. You can interrupt Claude at any phase, thinking, editing, whatever, with the escape key, and redirect as needed. Double tap escape to jump back in history and try a different approach. If you want to undo, just ask Claude to revert changes. Don't just hope for the best. Be that slightly annoying but very helpful project manager for your own solo workflow. Sometimes Claude's context window fills up with noise during long sessions, random conversation, old file contents, command logs. Use /clear often between tasks to reset context and keep things sharp. And if you need to pass data in, logs, CSVs, whatever, you've got options. You can copy and paste directly, pipe data into Claude from the shell, or even have Claude pull it in via bash or REST commands. Most sessions end up being a hybrid of these approaches. So here's something for the power users. But honestly, even as a solo dev, this is a game changer. Headless mode. With Claude Code, you can automate workflows in CI, pre-commit hooks, build scripts, or even just batch processing. You use the -p flag with a prompt to run in headless mode, and you can stream output as JSON for integration with other tools. This is awesome for things like issue triage. Maybe every new issue in your GitHub repo gets an automatic first pass labeling from Claude or code review notes, or you can use it as a super linter, catching not just style issues, but subjective stuff like confusing variable names or outdated comments. You can even pipe the output straight into your next processing step. If you're batching a big migration, Headless mode lets you programmatically loop over tasks, calling Claude for each one, and giving it a clear set of tools to use. The main thing to remember is that headless sessions don't persist, so you'll need to kick them off each time. Now for the advanced tactics, multi-Claude workflows. This is something I saw at bigger companies first, but it's actually super useful for solo devs working on complex projects too. One method is to have one Claude instance write code while another reviews or tests it. It's like having your own mini code review team, except it's all AI. You can clear the context or open another terminal tab, have one instance write and the other check. Sometimes keeping context separate between tasks results in a better end product, just like having two pairs of eyes on a tricky PR. You can also run multiple checkouts of your repo in separate folders, open each in a terminal, and start Claude in each one. Maybe one is working on your networking layer, another is refactoring a big SwiftUI view, and a third is fixing build warnings. Cycle through and approve or deny permission requests as needed. Alternatively, you can use Git work trees, less overhead than full checkouts, but you get all the isolation benefits. Each work tree is its own world, and you can have different Claude sessions focused on totally independent tasks. This is huge when you're shipping big new features in parallel, like working on a new widget for your app while also doing a major refactor of your persistence layer. Headless mode also comes in handy here. If you're automating migrations, fanning out to analyze tons of logs, or integrating with a processing pipeline, you can call Claude programmatically with different prompts and script the rest. And just remember, when you're running all these in parallel, naming conventions are your friend. Keep your folders and branches organized. And if you're on Mac, setting up notifications for when Claude needs your attention can be a nice bonus. So if you're still with me, you've just been through the full fire hose, best practices, weird edge cases, workflows, all of it. And here's the honest truth. None of this stuff matters unless you actually make it your own. That's kind of the whole deal with Claude Code and solo dev life in general. You're not just copying someone else's process. You're building your own, one that fits how you think, how you like to work, and what you're actually trying to build. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, don't stress. You don't have to do everything at once. Just start with one thing, maybe a simple Claude.md for your next project. See how Claude reacts, adjust it, notice what works, what doesn't, keep evolving it. You might end up with a few custom commands or better prompts or even a little automation that saves you 10 minutes every time you code. That adds up. The key is to treat Claude like a partner, not a magic box. The more you teach it about your world, your preferences, your stack, your messy habits, the better it gets. And the more you invest in that relationship, the more time you'll have for the stuff that actually lights you up. The ideas, the experiments, the fun, creative weirdness that made you want to build apps in the first place. All right, that's a wrap on this Claude Code best practice article. If you're still here, seriously, thank you. I know this one was a lot, but I hope it gave you some clarity, maybe even sparked a few ideas you want to try in your own setup. And look, this isn't about getting everything perfect. That's not the goal. It's about slowly shaping like a workflow that actually works with you, one that saves you mental bandwidth and frees you up to focus on the parts of building you actually enjoy. So if you try something from this episode and it clicks, let me know. If you hit a weird edge case or Claude totally misinterprets your Claude.md file, I want to hear that too. Drop a comment, DM me on Twitter, tag at Solo Swiftcrafter, whatever works. This community gets better when we share the little things. And hey, if this episode helped you, maybe send it to another dev who's deep in the solo trenches, wrestling with AI and wondering if it's actually worth it. Until next time, keep tinkering, keep refining, and keep building cool stuff. I'll see you soon. Peace.